You are listening to TRANSLAND, a podcast series about trans people in Iceland. My name is Ugla Stefanía or Owl, and I'm a trans campaigner, writer and filmmaker. I run the film project My Generation, which celebrates trans lives and trans experiences. This podcast series is a 4-part series where I will speak with trans people in Iceland about their experiences. In this episode, I'll be speaking with Svanhvít Ada and Alexander about their experiences with trans-related healthcare in Iceland. We spoke about how the system has been getting better in recent years, but there are still some major challenges that people are facing.
My name is Alex. I identify as a trans man, I guess, in English, and I use the pronouns he.
My name is Svanhvít Ada, and I would identify as a trans woman. I accept the pronouns she, they.
You've both been outspoken about your experiences with the healthcare in Iceland, and especially you in the media as well, Alex. And you've spoken a lot about how your experience was with the healthcare system and how it's sometimes a bit very binary, and you noticed how they were putting people into boxes, and also your experience with surgery and sort of other stuff. And I know that Svanhvít has similar views, and there's a lot of things to discuss. So maybe you can just start by your sort of general experience with trans healthcare in Iceland and what it's like been for you.
I personally can't find a lot of fault with the healthcare for my experiences because I identify as very binary male. So I fit into the boxes they try to put me in. But I've noticed that they do like to stereotype us trans people.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been thinking about the first interview I had with Óttar,
mm-hmm.
and he was asking me what kind of toys I used to play with. It was a very, very simple question, but I was like, well, I have an older brother and an older sister, so I played with cars and dolls.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make me non-binary?
Well, you think, you know?
Pretty much like Alex, I was able to come into the system because when I first came out, I probably was very binary. Like, I probably said a lot of the right things, whatever things that might be. I never met a lot of opposition in the system because of that. I kind of just went to the system,
Mm-hmm.
I did what I thought was right, and somehow just got through without a lot of issues. I think the only issue I actually have with the system, besides how archaic and conservative it is in many ways, at least the first steps, is that because most likely this is a very underfunded part of the health system, you kind of have to pursue every aspect of it yourself. Like, if you're a person that doesn't know how to fight for your things, to get like hormones, to get like surgery and your name change of all things, you actually just end up like just waiting in the corner, disappointed that nothing is moving along because you just kind of get forgotten. And that's because, like I said, that's because they're underfunded, they're understaffed, and that together kind of just creates a perfect storm of like things not working as well as one might want to do. Because you want to trust the experts, you want to say like, oh, I have this thing that's like fighting within me, and you want to just go and like just trust the system to help you.
You want them to take care of you, basically. And
basically like healthcare. Like you like, if you have any healthcare issue, you just want to go to a doctor, and the doctor says like, oh, you have this, like these symptoms, you have these problems, so we'll just do this. Like if it's surgery, we'll just do surgery, and we'll like take care of it. If you need like aftercare, we'll do that. But because of like this is like just few people that are doing this, you just end up on a list, and you may or may not be forgotten because of it. Now, to be fair, I had my surgery like more than 5 years ago now.
I mean, I went through my sort of medical transition a long time ago as well, like 2009, 10. I feel like a bit old when I say that. And but at the time, it was sort of the same things that you describe. You know, it was very, very archaic, very stuck in stereotypes. I was asked what sort of toys I played with. I was asked what sort of underwear I was wearing. I was asked if I had had sex and then with whom, and all of these like really invasive, weird questions, which essentially have nothing to do with whether you're a trans person. And there is a culture that the trans community kind of trains each other, and they kind of tell each other what you need to say to get the healthcare. And I guess for people who are more binary, it's easier. Like in your cases, you were just fine with these sort of more binary ways of being a man or being a woman. But for other people, it's not that simple.
Well, like when I came out, the trans population of Iceland was to begin with very binary. So like when you came out, you kind of didn't think about like, oh wait, maybe I don't fit into like male, female, binary, like
because
types.
even within the trans community, they were sort of enforcing that as well in a way.
Yeah. I mean, like, and I mean, remember like one like older trans woman, like she would come up to me like when I just started attending the meetings, and she would go like, "Oh no, sweetie, you should walk more like this. This is like how women walk."
I remember the same. Like somebody said to me, "Oh, one of the first things you'll have to learn is how to walk again." And I said, "Learn how to walk again." And I immediately thought, "Oh, I'm gonna have like surgery, and I'm gonna like be unable to walk for a while, and it's gonna really be tough to learn to walk again." But no, she's talking about walking like a lady.
I would say that as time passes, I probably don't like identify as much with binary identification that like at the time were felt like normal, because I didn't like know like what was the right way to feel like, what was the right way to be like. So you just come out and you like you trust the world, you trust like you think that people like know better or like or what was best for you. So you can't just like, well, okay, like I belong to this part of the binary, now I must belong to this part of the binary. And like instead of like realizing that it's a spectrum and you kind of like fall somewhere on it, and then and also the thing you kind of learn after you like been trying to uphold some like binary laws, almost gender laws, or you want to call it, you kind of realize like how ridiculous some of these like assumptions you have about like basically gender, basically like, and how people should walk or like or behave or whatever. It's like, I mean, you just realize like nobody can like fit neatly into either box. Everybody is well unique. Like.
I'm in contact with a lot of younger trans people now, so I notice these themes you're talking about with the people getting forgotten in the way they talk. Regards to surgery and hormones and stuff, they essentially get forgotten. So I just encourage them to reach out, just try to push the boxes and stuff. But it kind of sucks that young people, I mean, as young as like 16-year-olds, have to fight the system.
And they have to be very assertive.
Yeah.
And that's not something everybody can do, I think.
I can tell you that like fighting for what you want in the healthcare system when you're a trans person feels a bit like fighting for your first job after like graduation from university. Like, you know, like you basically like, oh,
you're gonna have to prove yourself that you can do this.
Yes. and you'd be lucky you maybe have like the email or the phone number of HR, so you're just harassing like, okay, so what's up next, did I get the job, like will I get a vagina? I mean it feels kind of the same when I think about it.
Am I good enough to have a vagina? Can I get my penis now? You know.
Good point.
I think this describes the healthcare system in a way, because I think at the time there weren't that many trans people that were out, but now in the past 10 years maybe there's been an explosion in trans awareness, not just in Iceland but just in the world in general, and that's made more people capable of coming out because people see themselves represented in film, they see people being interviewed. Social media is a huge factor because people can communicate with other trans people, and I think we're seeing trans people coming out in much larger groups, and the infrastructure of the system isn't able to deal with all of these new people because they don't have the money, they don't have the funding, they don't have the time, they don't have, you know, their job doesn't allocate enough time for them to deal with trans people. I know it's just a binary question, but what's your like worst and best experience with the healthcare? If we're just going to go in complete binaries because we love it.
I love the binary. I guess my best experience was when they approved my hormone therapy. I did have to fight for it a little bit because at the time you did have to have like this real life experience for like 12 months before you could get the hormones. But I fought the system a little bit and got it earlier. And it felt like such a personal victory. And I got my hormones, which was great.
The worst experience is a bit hard for me because I would say it's not related to an actual thing that somebody did, more like a mistake someone did. But again, it's a bit personal. I kind of don't want to go into details. I do, however, want to say, like, probably one of my best experiences, and getting hormones, it was a fantastic experience. But weirdly enough, one of the best experiences that, like, when I had to be like at the hospital for a bit longer than I expected, the nurses working there, like, I'm not kidding, like we can complain about certain aspects of the healthcare system and whatnot, but the nurses working at the hospital, like okay, maybe I can't like say that like all of them are, but I'm pretty much sure that 99.9% of them are just fucking angels.
Most of them are, yes.
It's like I remember when, like, after surgery, like, I remember the low points. I remember like crying and everything.
And the nurses were there for it all.
Yeah, and it was just like, goddamn, they were just like working like fucking angels. It's just like, damn.
Yeah, I think, doctors often become quite mechanical, and I think for trans people this is particularly difficult because it's such a personal thing. For most people, if they have genital surgery or they have surgeries that matter so much to their well-being and who they want to be, so to have someone kind of not treat you as a person, kind of just treat you as a patient seems really unaffirming, and it seems like the person is kind of disrespecting who you are. And I remember when I was at the hospital, there was a doctor who wasn't even my main doctor, because my main doctor went on vacation when I was in the hospital. It was a great thing. I hope she had a great time. And because I didn't. And this other doctor came in, and he was just like this older guy. He'd never really treated trans people before. And he was really tall, had white hair, glasses, and he was supposed to do like an examination basically. And he came in, introduces himself really formally, blah, blah, blah. And then, he has to put on gloves to do an examination. And he asked for gloves which were extra large. And I had just had my vagina made like 3 days ago. And I was just like, this is not gonna, like, you are not capable nor qualified to do this. And he kind of didn't understand why I felt so uncomfortable. And then he had to do an examination. And of course, he didn't really know what he was doing. It was just a complete mess. And he basically had to rush off because his beeper went off. And he just kind of left me there, having done something, and I was just like lying there almost in my own blood. And I was just like, what the fuck just happened? And then the nurses came in and fixed everything. It's just like they just have to clean up their mess.
But I have to say though, like, just to redeem doctors a little bit, because there are many of them, like, they tend to like come in.
They're
like,
all bad.
No. And I won't go so far. And I sometimes think if this is like a generational shift or something. But I remember, like, you had, like, older doctors, like, having their shifts and working together. They tended, like I said, treat you like your average car. Now...
Your average car.
Yeah, but then there was this one doctor. He was a bit younger than the other ones. I think he was, like, 30-something. And he was a doctor on, I think, a children's ward, like, normally, but was doing shifts here. And every time he came in to, like, look and, like, check up on me, he'd be, like, he's smiling, being like, are you okay? And be really friendly. And I was like, wow, like, you were actually...
There's an actual doctor with a soul.
Yeah, and, like, actually, he was a nice person. I was like, well, maybe it's a facade. But then he did one thing, and it kind of, like, I'm not kidding, it blew my mind. Like all over, like 4B or whatever the name of the word is. I think it was Saturday, and I was just like, it was evening, kind of depressed because I've been there for a long time. And there's a knock, and I'm like, and then there's a doctor, and I see the doctor standing there, and he's like dressed up in like a nice suit with a tie, like, and like basically like he had been like having a party or something, and apparently. I think it was like his daughter or like cousin something that just had a confirmation like earlier in the day. And he was just like, yeah, I just came from the confirmation, but I was just kind of like, I want to make sure you're feeling okay, so I just decided to visit. And I was just like, who are you? Why are you behaving like this? I can't expect this from every doctor, I was
just putting the standard too high.
Yeah, it's like I don't know, it's like it looked like nobody was trying. And here we have like the gold medal like achiever just in the empathy Olympics, just doing his and he felt so natural doing it. That was, I think, the best thing. He was just like, hey, I'm a nice person and I don't even have to try. How are you doing? And I'm just, I'm doing great, thank you, just because of you.
It's so funny.
I recently had like a minor surgery with the trans team, and I managed to do the surgery without seeing my doctor before, after, or, well, I was asleep during, so I didn't, she didn't talk to me before, she didn't talk to me after, because she didn't have the time, so I saw her a week later, and she explained to me what had actually happened.
Oh my god, that is the worst.
But the nurses were there to get me through it.
But think about it, this is how like they can keep the cost down. The phantom doctors.
You never know when they came in, what they did, but they did something.
They did something.
I had the similar experience with them. I had like a minor kind of thing, and after the surgery, like, I didn't meet them before, I only met them like a week after, and it's like, oh yeah, by the way, I did this thing as well. And I was just like, I'm sorry, this is to be some sort of breach of consent. It's like,
yes.
We did not talk about this. And like, it's fine, you didn't do anything bad, but I would have liked to have known.
I can't expect like going in for surgery and then you wake up and you manage to look down with a mirror and you see like a tattoo. Jane Doe was.
No, it's just like, what's gonna happen? But I mean, I do want to say that these people are definitely trying to do their best. None of them have any bad intentions. They're all very good people. It's just that trans healthcare doesn't have enough funding. There isn't enough time allocated to it. So we often just get this like weird experiences where we just don't know what happens, or you know, somebody does something weird, or there's a weird doctor that's like the best doctor in the world.
But again, I think it's also that kind of we end up having a double whammy because the transgender team is underfunded and the entire healthcare like system is underfunded.
Yeah.
So like, and so it actually becomes like that much worse than before.
Yeah. For many trans people, we don't have the luxury of time, especially if you're a younger trans person and you're coming out and you're starting puberty or these things. You don't have the luxury of waiting because you're going to go through a puberty which is traumatic. And I think every trans person that has had to do that can testify that puberty was probably one of the worst times of their lives, at least for those that want medical interventions.
There seems to be like a shift going on. And again, I think it's a generational shift. Like we have a certain old vanguard, and like you have like these older people like they've been working on this like for a very long time. Probably gets more and more difficult to like keep up with the current development. But then you have like the younger people, like a new endocrinologist. He has a completely different way of approaching this. There is a change happening, but it's just so slow and gradual. I mean, I was relatively old when I came out and started my like transition, and I even felt like the movement itself was glacial. I can only just hope that like with new people graduating as doctors, nurses, psychiatrists, psychologists, that they are all becoming better. They're all becoming more open-minded and more like empathetic to like the situation a lot of trans people are going through.
I think there's also a shift in the way people see being trans, because it used to be, oh, you have a mental disorder and that's, you're trans because of that. But now, you know, people are saying that because people are trans and because they aren't able to be themselves, they might develop depression, they might have dysphoria, and this can be solved by helping them with trans-related healthcare. I've been very frustrated with not just the team in Iceland, but general trans healthcare teams. They say, oh, if you have a depression, we have to solve the depression first. But what they don't understand is that you can't solve the depression because it's caused because the person cannot be themselves and isn't allowed to be themselves. Giving people hormones and surgeries and whatever they might need isn't the magical solution if you have mental health issues, but it sure as hell is going to make it easier for you to deal with those issues.
Yeah, it helps a lot.
What are your hopes for the future, Alex, in terms of trans healthcare?
I mean, I know there are changes now. They're getting a more like central control over the time allocation. So you have to go through like one person first and they talk to the rest of the team. So that's great. I think that will help a lot. But I guess more funding for them so they can have more time to talk to us and acknowledge us.
I mean, I have many dreams. World peace, and of course, that our
This
future...
isn't a beauty pageant, sweetheart.
No, I want world peace, and I want our future to be like humanity in Star Trek. But on a more like now basis, I guess I'll say that like I think I would love for things to change too. Is like that there would be less hurdles. There'd be like that doesn't feel like you always have to like climb this really tall wall just to get help. Often when you're trying to contact somebody in the team to help you, you're also afraid that if you say the wrong thing, or do the wrong thing, or whatever, that they will somehow hinder you, or they will somehow stop you, or even reverse you. That's like for me. I remember at the time that was like a big fear for me. Like I think they need to be open to people's or trans people's experiences. So they themselves can get a better picture of how variable like individuals within the transgender community.
Yeah.
And I think that's actually one of the biggest mistakes I see in like transgender healthcare. There's this denial of individuality between people.
And this is such a personal thing, isn't it?
Yeah,
like everybody experiences their gender differently regardless of whether you're trans or not. So, you know, everybody experiences their body differently, even if you're not trans.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just... But then you have like maybe a team of people that kind of like, because they don't have any like objective measurement, they just end up saying like, oh, we have these like mythical stereotypes of what's correct or what's wrong, and it's based on like the 1960s, it's based on baby boomers or whatnot. And like it doesn't work out, especially like now that like people are just, they evolve, we're always changing, so I can't use the same standards that like we're expecting of me and I maybe expect of others on like younger generations or even older generations, because it's just there's so much difference, so much evolution going on in the social consciousness.
Yeah, I think that's a beautiful way to end it, unless there's anything you want to add.
Well, I just like to add that like Star Trek is the future.
Great. Alex.
No, I agree with that completely.
Star Trek is the future.
Yeah, we want to Star Trek.
Heard it
society.
here. Great. Thank you so much for chatting, and have a great rest of your evening.
Yeah. Thank you.
If you like this episode, be sure to share it far and wide and stay tuned for the next one, where I will talk with Anna Kristjánsdóttir, who is the first publicly out trans person in Iceland and is often held as the mother of all trans people in Iceland. If you want to support the work I do, please check out my Patreon site for my film project, My Generation. See you next time.